Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Tony Mayer. We warmly welcome the family of Lance Corporal Frank Exavour Moloney, whose story will be told shortly. We also welcome members of the British Army hockey team who are also in attendance this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal Frank Exavour Moloney. Frank Moloney was born in Trentham, Victoria on the 23rd of April 1919. The son of Michael and Elizabeth Moloney, he grew up in a large family and went on to work as a tennis racket maker. With the advent of the Second World War, Moloney became part of the militia, serving part-time with the Australian Army Medical Corps. On the 16th of June 1941, he enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, the volunteer expeditionary force that served full-time and was permitted to operate outside Australia and its territories. After being taken on strength in August, Moloney transferred to the Australian Army Medical Corps. In early November 1941, he was fined for breaking out of camp and failing to appear at a place of parade. This breach of military discipline would not be the last. A few days later, Private Moloney was transferred to Military Hospital in Bonegilla in northeast Victoria, where newly formed infantry battalions were undertaking training. In early 1942, he transferred to a similar hospital at Seymour, at the southern end of the Goulburn Valley. Having been found absent without leave in early February and fined, Moloney joined the 20th Field Ambulance, but was again fined twice more for the same reason the following month. Later in the month, he was confined to barracks for a week for failing to appear at a place of parade. In April, Moloney was transferred to an infantry training battalion and began his training. In June, he was fined for conduct prejudicial to good order and military discipline. The following month, in July 1942, he transferred to reinforcements for the 2nd 23rd Infantry Battalion. Embarking for active overseas service in August, Moloney and other reinforcements to the 2nd 23rd Battalion arrived at Suez in October and were taken on strength in November after the battalion had been withdrawn from fighting at El Alamein in North Africa. After a period of rest, the battalion was directed to return to Australia in order to engage the threat posed by the Japanese. Embarking in January 1943, Moloney and his comrades arrived in Melbourne in February. After a period of leave, the battalion's personnel concentrated at Seymour in Victoria, where Moloney had earlier worked with the Australian Army Medical Corps. Rather than working in the military hospital, he and his colleagues in the 2nd 23rd began a period of training and reorganisation as the battalion learned to operate in jungle conditions. In March, Moloney was again fined for being absent without leave. He completed his training on Yatherton Tablelands in Queensland before his battalion moved to Milne Bay in New Guinea in August 1943. The following month, on the 4th of September, the battalion took part in an amphibious landing to capture Lae, during which one of the landing craft the battalion headquarters was travelling in was bombed by a Japanese aircraft, killing the battalion's commanding officer. The 2nd 23rd then took part in a brief advance along the coast, driving on Lae from the east through the jungle, crossing several rivers along the way. Several minor skirmishes took place during the advance. The most significant action was fought on the 2nd day of the operation between an isolated platoon and the remnants of a Japanese company, during which the Japanese force was largely destroyed. Lae fell in mid-September, more quickly than the Allies had expected, as troops from the 7th Division entered the town from the west. But a large part of the Japanese garrison managed to escape inland towards the Huon Peninsula. Shortly afterwards, the 2nd 23rd took part in a second amphibious landing at Scarlet Beach, north of Finchhafen. Between the 22nd of September and 9th of December, Moloney and his comrades in the 2nd 23rd took part in the Huon Peninsula Campaign, with significant actions around Saddleburg and Warrio as the Australians advanced inland. In early 1944, the battalion took part in the advance to Sio as the withdrawing Japanese were pursued north. In February 1944, Moloney, the 2nd 23rd and the bulk of the 9th Division were withdrawn from New Guinea and transported back to Australia for rest. For the next year, the battalion was based around Ravenshoe in Queensland, where it was almost completely rebuilt. In April, Moloney suffered from a hernia and was treated before returning to duty in July. On the 1st of November 1944, he was appointed Lance Corporal. In April 1945, the battalion embarked from Townsville, travelling to Borneo to take part in Operation Oboe, the last major Allied campaign in the southwest Pacific area, aimed at liberating Japanese-held British Borneo and Dutch Borneo. The 2nd 23rd was assigned a lead role in the initial landing, and after negotiating the muddy landing beach, fought its way into Tarakan town. Several actions were fought throughout the day, as men came up against Japanese pillboxes and snipers. But by the end of the first day, they had secured all but one of the initial objectives. The battalion fought several actions to help secure the high ground around the beachhead before moving on to help secure the airfield. Throughout May and June, the fighting continued as the Australians advanced into the steep inland areas of the island. By the middle of June, the fighting had mainly subsided, and the battalion began mopping up operations in the central sector of the island, conducting patrols for stragglers until late July. This was the end of the war for the men of the battalion, some of whom would remain in Borneo until late 1945, restoring civilian administration, overseeing reconstruction efforts, supervising the surrender of Japanese troops, and liberating prisoners of war held in camps around Borneo. Frank Moloney, however, would not be among them. He was killed in action on the 6th of May 1945, a few months before the end of the fighting in the area. Initially buried in Tarakan, near where he fell, his remains were later reinterred in Labuan War Cemetery, where they lie today. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal Frank Exavour Moloney, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.